Welcome to Cultivating Independent Spaces in India with Home Sweet Home and Reliable Copy, and not in the title, but also G159. And I wanted to start, as I like to do, to talk about a little bit more about Art South Asia Project for those who might not be aware of us before, and this might be your first interaction with us. ASAP is a UK-based arts education and development non-for-profit. We support initiatives to widen and deepen the engagement with modern and contemporary visual arts from South Asia and its diaspora. ASAP works with institutions and individuals, supporting selected research projects, publications, exhibitions, and events. And we offer annual grants and facilitate access to wider knowledge networks in collaboration with expertise across the nations of Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka and its diaspora. And so actually this talk came out of a partnership with one of our grantees from 2022 to 2023, the wonderful Chinar Shah, whose organization Home Sweet Home was funded. What we'll do is I will introduce Chinar first and also introduce Home Sweet Home and the work she's done with us last year. And then Chinar will take the reins and introduce Nihaal and Sarasija's work to date. So Chinar is an artist based in Bangalore. She's interested in documentary practices and uses her screen as a site to produce, circulate, and negotiate images. She's the founder of Home Sweet Home.
Progress.
Ooh. Please do keep your everything on mute so we don't get too many interruptions while we're speaking. So Home Sweet Home is a research and publication platform which investigates independent artist-led and curatorial projects in India that exist on the fringes of the mainstream art market, occupying non-commercial spaces to enable artistic engagements. It started as an exhibition series in 2015 and occupied domestic spaces to exhibit works of art. As I mentioned, ASAP supported Home Sweet Home from 2022 to 2023, and Home Sweet Home formed a research hub to study artist-led initiatives in India from 1990. It conducted pan-India interviews with artists, writers, and audiences to understand the breadth of how artists have collectivized over the years and extended their practices through independent projects and curatorial spaces outside the mainstream art market space. This research project is now an online magazine that works as a site to write about, archive, and engage critically and creatively with institutions and curatorial projects by artists in India since 1990. I would highly recommend going to look at the website. It's absolutely brilliant. And you can find it on our website as well. So over to Chinar to introduce Nihaal and Sarasija. You're on mute, Chinar.
Thanks, Mala. And I'm really excited today to be in this conversation with Nihaal and Sarasija. And Nihaal, we've worked together for so many years now. I've known him for, I guess, 10 years. So it's really nice that we've never been on the same platform in this manner, doing conversation about initiatives we've done. So it's quite, though we've been both part of each other's work intrinsically, and Sarasija as well. I want to briefly talk about G159 that Nihaal ran a while back in 2013, between 2013 to 2016 in Yelahanka, and it was an exhibition series, a project space that sort of ran out of this strange room in this PG accommodation that he was running, and they had some 40 odd exhibitions, including I showed there, and it's that's where I suppose I said, me and her, got to know each other, and to think of that space G159 in Yelahanka. It's a suburb of Bangalore, and on the first floor there were these huge windows where there could have been a really nice wall where they could have because it was he was primarily doing exhibitions there, they could have used it, but there were these huge windows in that room, and then you sort of work around that really difficult room to make exhibitions. And yeah, it was this really successful space that he ran for all those years, and then it came to an end, and it was really this emotional, I suppose, ending that they called final review, I think, where so many artists sort of came together and to exhibit work. And after a few years in 2018, Nihaal had this idea already that he wanted to work in publication spaces and started Reliable Copy. And then soon after, Sarasija joined him. And now they are Nihaal, Sarasija, and Stuti running the show, which is a unique publication house, I suppose, in India, focused on artists' writings and works, writings by artists also. And they have been, since 2018, they have published all these books. They've been working so hard to kind of like now really create this curatorial vision for themselves in all of these years. So it's very exciting to be working with them, both of them artists themselves, and then taking up this role as publisher, editor, and everything else, I'm sure, that comes with running an organization. So yeah, I'm excited. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Chinar. So we've obviously, Chinar and I have spoken a little bit, and it's always lovely to hear about the organization from the organizers. So I think it would be lovely, either Nihaal or Sarasija, if you can kind of give us a little bit more information about the projects you've been working on at Reliable Copy. And
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mala. Thank you, Chinar. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having us here. And thank you also to everyone that's joined us. I'm surprised that some of you are here because you know everything we have to say already. But I'm very happy to be also seeing some new faces, well, names more than faces. I think this is a story. What Chinar said, moving from a project space or an exhibition series to publishing, which is also what Chinar has done. In moving from Home Sweet Home as an exhibition series that took place in her house and in other apartments to being this kind of online platform for publishing, writing about independent art spaces from the 90s to the present. So thank you for joining us on this story. Where do we start? Where do we begin? Sarasija, any?
No, Nihaal, you want to start with Reliable Copy starting? Just that?
Okay. But what is the starting? Like, it kind of began as an idea. I mean, okay, let me try and put it a bit more chronologically. G159, as Chinar said, happened between 2013 and 16. And, you know, I mean, this kind of really came out of this need. I was in art school. We were a lot of people just hanging out together. Chinar was my teacher. She was just a few years older, but she was already teaching at Shrishti. And there were all these friends in me that were hanging out, and we had no place as such to show what we were making. And so what ended up happening is I moved into a student PG, and that building had just finished being constructed. So the living room had no furniture, and it was freshly painted, and it was a new building. So it just looked like this empty space that nobody was ready to use. I mean, in that PG system, we were all given rooms. So I had a bedroom, two other guys had their bedrooms, but this hall, no one was really comfortable using because it was nobody's space. It was a shared space, but we didn't really know each other. We were all new here. And, you know, one day we just had a party there, and people just started to draw and paint and started pulling out all this art material. And maybe actually now that we've begun, let me just share my screen and show you pictures. So here we are. So it began like this. This was can you see?
all good, we can see.
Yeah. So this was the little party that was happening. We're all eating biryani and all these art materials came out. And, you know, there were some things that we just found in the house and put up, like this frame, this thing on the wall here. And a few days later, I mean, my friend Roshan and I started it together, Roshan Shakil, who again comes in as a character in the story because he later goes on to design many of the Reliable Copy books. We started this together. And a few days later, we said, okay, we should, you know, this place looks like an exhibition. At the end of the party, it looked like that was an exhibition. So we said, let's formalize this. And we made this kind of logo, and we made a little flyer, and we, you know, fixed the lighting, and we said, okay, this is a show. And we called some people over to come see, mainly other students, other friends, and the teachers at Shrishti. but also we had a few neighbors that walked in. And, these people really liked it. People enjoyed visiting, and, we had a lot of encouragement at that point. So we said, okay, we'll continue. And like that, we kept doing things. We would make these little posters. We would stick it all around college and around Yelahanka, which was the suburb of Bangalore, which is the suburb of Bangalore. And it just kind of took off from there. We began by showing a lot of student works, and even performances and things like that. And then we started showing some of the faculty who were teaching at Shrishti. We invited them to also do shows. This is the space. We just filled it with dried leaves as an installation. It was also very much part of That's Me. It was still very much a part of, an extension of what was happening in college. When we would learn something, we would try it out here. So we were studying performance art, and, we were trying it out here. And at some point, it just kind of got a lot of attention. Nobody was really talking about it, or nothing was really happening, but suddenly it started getting a lot of traction, and we started doing more. We started organizing these talks. This was Shelley Sachs, who was Joseph Boyce's student. She came to Bangalore and she gave a talk here. And it just kind of kept going somehow. And the main thing was we had this space, and we didn't have to pay for it or anything. We were already paying for our rooms, and we had this space. It was just an extension. We did screenings. I'm running through, and we can talk more about some of these things, but we had this performance. It was very informal in many ways, but it was also formalized. It had posters. This is Roshan. Let's see. Yeah, we kept doing talk. Maybe you guys know Anna Fox, who's from the UK. She did a talk there. She was Chinar's teacher, I believe. More performances. It was very much student-led. And then there was a pause. Then for some reason, there was this big pause because everyone kind of was starting to lose interest. This was a lot of work. We were getting busy with college. And there was a little bit of a break. A few months, nothing really happened. And Roshan, who I started it with, was also starting to get less and less interested in art per se. He was getting more and more interested in book design and publishing. And so that's when another friend of mine, Gavati Wad, she joined in as part of the organizing team. And together we realized that, just when that kind of break was happening, we realized it was almost 2 years since we started. So we decided, okay, we can't let this go. We just have 1 more year in college. So let's just push through and see what can happen. And then we said, okay, we'll start with a birthday party. So this was kind of G159's birthday party. And we got 3 friends to make works that were kind of about the space in some way. And we got this cake from a bakery, and we just had a little party. That's the window that Chinar was talking about. And that really pushed us, because the energy that suddenly came into the space and the kind of motivation we had on that occasion really pushed us to continue doing this. And that's when we kind of got a bit more serious with the programming we were doing. This is another friend of ours who had made these videos, and we screened it, and house full, as you can see. And then we started doing other programs, but let me jump from here into Chinar's exhibition, which was kind of a big moment for us. So you can see the same space, that's Chinar. We had covered the floor with this fake grass, with this kind of plastic fake grass, and she had taken all these screenshot photographs. So that was what was on display. And this show suddenly, took the exhibitions we were doing to another level. We were suddenly, what we were showing was suddenly way ahead of, just student work. And then that momentum somehow just continued. Like this exhibition by Ragini Bo, she also, did a great show. It was very well received. We weren't just showing printouts. We were showing now suddenly sculptures and drawings, and, that became really serious. Then we had another show which had international artists as well as students, as well as teachers, all come together. Then, I mean, look at the crowd at this performance, for instance, you know, it's crazy. Then it kept going. Yeah, this is when the FTII's strike and protests were happening. So we were going to organize some films in college, but the college didn't let us show those films. So we moved it to our rooftop. And Gavati, who was organizing this with me, had this thing about arranging fruit. So we didn't have the money to offer anything else at opening. So we always had fruits and rum. So she would always take charge of arranging the fruits. And that became kind of a work. And then somebody who was Atreo, this other student who was there, he made a film about the screening. So that's on our website. As you can see, we're nearing the end. Yeah, I mean, there were more exhibitions. This is by Linda Stauffer, who was this exchange student from Switzerland, who also started a parallel project space. At that time, she felt that we were too organized and formal, so she wanted something really whack, and she did it. Short-lived, but that was part of the plan. And then we did this really great show by Rebecca John, a curator. It was the first kind of curator-led show that we did. And we had works by Yogesh Barve, Amol Patil, and Poonam Jain, who were all part of this space called Clark House Initiative in Bombay. And we did this exchange show where we 3 artists from Bangalore would go and show at Clark House, and 3 artists from there would come and show here. And this was a really landmark show for me as an artist and as somebody organizing exhibitions. And these guys, Poonam, Amol, and Yogesh, I think they're still some of the greatest artists I've met. Amol's, I think, got a show opening in the UK, so maybe you guys are familiar with his work.
We've got
This
a
is
show opening next week, I think, in London.
Yeah, please visit. That'll be a great show. And I feel that there's things he was doing back here that have now been developed into the kind of work he's doing. Like here, this was this puja room that we had, which of course none of us are going to use as a prayer room. So he filled it with mud, and he had this projection of himself kind of just toiling away on that. Yogesh did this thing where he took out the mirror that was always in one position in the living room, and he just put it somewhere else, but you could see kind of the outline of it on that wall. There was this little ball bearing that he hung from the ceiling. This is Rebecca, who organized the show. The videos, we also could show videos because we were part of a PG, a paying guest kind of accommodation thing that the students were eligible for. And the owners of the house gave us all one TV. So we would just borrow all the TVs from all our neighbors and just, show videos on them. We couldn't like drill nails and install, so they were just on the floor. But I mean, we had hacks like this. And this is the mirror that he had taken down. All that to say that, we had no money for any of this. We had no budgets. We were just doing this on our own. It wasn't formal in any way. It wasn't registered as anything. I mean, I don't even think the house owners knew about it, but then it started coming in the newspapers, and then they found out. It was all positive, so they didn't really object. And then later they said, oh, we left you alone because we were encouraging of it. But really, they had no idea what was happening. And we had a very antagonistic relationship with the college itself, Shrishti. I mean, antagonistic is maybe a bit harsh, but they really, I mean, as a management, they didn't really know where to place us or what to do with us. So they just kind of let us be. They didn't really interfere because we weren't really interfering. But we had teachers there who were really encouraging, like Chinar. So they would help us kind of smuggle out college equipment, like projectors or generator backup, or, they would just kind of rent it out on their own name and just give it to us for the day or a week. And we would use college to print out stuff like the flyers. We all had, these machines, these A3 machines in college. We were just using that. But then they kind of started getting pissed off with us when we started doing like the FTII screenings. But then when it all got over, I had graduated, and then I met the director one day and she said, "You've done a wonderful job." I said, "Why didn't you support us ever?" You know, I went there and asked them for money once just to buy a projector and just to pay for the food and drinks, but they didn't support us. So, I mean, that's the story. This is Renuka Rajiv's solo exhibition. I'm not sure, but it might be her first in India, the first time she had done a solo. Chinar's, it was the first time she had done a solo. So this became a space for a lot of artists to test out, you know, without any kind of consequence, without this fear of failing or without, you know, it wasn't a gallery in the sense that we were selling work. Nothing really sold. I think once something got sold, but we just said, talk to the artist and they sold it like that. This is a great work by Gavati. She dressed up as these 4 kind of nationalistic figures and went to a photo studio and got her picture clicked, like a passport photo, but with a saffron background. She's dressed as Vivekananda. She's dressed as Shivaji. I think Sardar Patel, I'm not sure here, and Gandhi. And she also made this video where at the same costume shop, she found all these goggles that were Gandhi goggles. It's just her trying them on one by one. Yeah, you can see it better here. And Gavati was one of the organizers. And Gavati then decided that I wasn't letting her control this too much. I'm very controlling. I think Sarasija and I are similar, so we get along. But I wasn't letting Gavati do much here, except like implement what I wanted to do. So she started her own thing, not in any kind of confrontational way. She was still part of it, but I mean, we just kind of gave each other that space to do parallel things. So she started doing exhibitions at a Taste of India restaurant in Yelahanka. But that's a whole other conversation.
Did G159 end because you moved out of the space?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it's just, I'm at 37. We'll get to 40 and it'll end. And then at 37, Roshan came back and said, you know, I've got this deck of cards that I'm making. And he got 54 students from Shrishti, each to illustrate a card from a deck. And that became a publication, and we did a launch event there. And that was G159's first publication. And I had nothing to do with it, but it in a way became the first publication I released, a precursor to Reliable Copy. And by then again, it was a birthday. So here we are, 1 more year. And by then, what's happening is our time in Shrishti is ending. Our 4 years in college are kind of running out. And that's, Mala, to answer your question, why it kind of ended, because we were going to graduate and we were going to leave and we didn't have access to the space anymore. And this is Arshad's exhibition. I think Arshad's on call with us, so maybe you can ask him about it and his experience. I'm sorry to say, but this was, by then, everyone was in exam mode, so we actually had not a very crowded opening, but I think it was a great show. And I think over the next few days, there were people that came and saw it. Again, we borrowed a TV from somebody, and these were these photographic works that he had made. And that was the second to last exhibition. I realize now that was almost towards the end. And then we did this big show called Final Review, because that's what we were coming to in college, our final reviews. And a friend, Tanik, he made this drawing one day. We were just on holiday and we were just chatting, and he just quickly made this doodle. And he wrote it as G159, which translates to kind of like Life 59. And he drew a house and then said it's an art gallery. So, I mean, that drawing was just a doodle he made, but it made so much sense to me. I used it to make this poster. And in this, we tried to bring together a lot of the artists we had worked with so far, as well as use it as a chance to show the works that we weren't able to and now couldn't moving forward because it was ending. And for this, we took over the whole building. We expanded towards all the space we could. So the building kind of starts here and you walk in from here, and Rakhi Peswani made an installation across all 3 floors of the building, which was we had this elevator shaft, but nobody built an elevator because we're students and they didn't have to do it. So Raki took over all those spaces and made this work. And you climb up from here to come to us. This is a close-up. And then Poonam did this kind of black tape everywhere, just kind of a reduction and a marker. And then I forget who made this, but this was there. And you walk in through here and then you come in here, and this is the apartment we've been seeing all along. Vikram had made this as a performance at the space. We had an event, I skipped through that. This is Raki again. So I'm going to zoom in a little faster. So yeah, I mean, now you can see kind of zoom through a bit faster, but you can see the exhibition. I mean, this is a very simple link, g159.tumblr.com. So anyone that's interested in taking more time with this website, please visit. I made it when it was still operational and Tumblr still exists, so this website still exists. This is Suresh Jairam, who is also somewhere part of the story because he ran One Shanti Road, still runs One Shanti Road, and that's he's someone we've worked with on a book as well, the One Shanti Road cookbook. So he wasn't really well known as an artist anymore. He's known as an art historian and for Shanti Road, but these are paintings he made in college. So we got a slide projector and he had all these slides. So we were just showing that. And yeah, so there were more works like that. This was Chinar's work, right? This is Chinar's work. These were these takeaway posters that she had printed. This was a repeat from the Clark House show. So there were things that were still coming in that were also stand-ins for some things that had happened. There were new works. It was a lot of fun. And you can see, this is Gavati's fruit arrangements. She made it again as takeaways so people could take them and go as the last memory of G159. This is where Amol's mud was, now cleaned up and made into an exhibition space again. And yeah, I mean, there were some really, really great, strong works in this show. This was my bedroom, which also became part of this exhibition. Yeah, this is over my bed. This is a painting of Chinar's exhibition, of the grass from that Aditi Rajiv made. Yeah, so you can see the space. I have it in the back over there. This was another of the bedrooms in the PG. You can see what it looks like now. They gave us these kind of standard tables, a plastic chair, a bed, these curtains. This is what it looked like, and it looks like any other kind of student accommodation with these artworks in it. I mean, you can see the walls are dirty. It's just what it was, you know? And yeah, this is by Smriti. Smriti, I think, was part of ASAP.
Yeah, Smriti is the founding member.
Yeah, so this is Smriti's work. She was a teacher at Shrishti at that time. Now, the performance also took place on the opening. There were video works. They never really gave us a kitchen. They gave us a bathroom without a toilet, which was supposed to be our kitchen, but nobody really used it. There was one induction stove and an aquaguard. I mean, it was really like terrible, the kind of living conditions they gave us as students, but we made the best of it. And then because this started, I never moved out from there. And this is Raki's thing continuing all the way on the rooftop, where also we've done some programming and another sculpture, and that's it. And that was the end. Sorry, it took so long.
No, thank you. It's such an important archive, especially the artists' names you're saying are artists who are coming up all the time in art fairs and exhibitions. So it's so interesting to learn that these artists had started in a way in your space as well. It would be really fascinating to hear from Sarasija a little bit as well, and how your spaces moved into becoming reliable copy.
Actually, I expected Nihaal to talk a little bit more about the founding of Reliable Copy, because that is very much something that happened before I turned up in the picture. structure at all, like Chinar mentioned. But I will now start it on Nihal's behalf a little bit. So in 2018, I think after he had done, when he was in a year-long fellowship in Lebanon, in Ashkelon, that's when he had started thinking of the idea of publishing more and more, and in a more formal fashion, I would say, in comparison to G159, that started a lot more organically. And in 2018, he had come to a point where he was fairly sure of what it was that made him want to do it, which I'll get into in a little bit. And so he had registered Reliable Copy formally. So in a sense, he had a basic idea in mind. He had a name, he had a logo, he had a registered account. And at that point, I wasn't in Bangalore. So I came to Bangalore for 3 months in Shanti Road. I was doing a residency there. And at the end of it, I met Nihaal, and I was telling him that I do want to possibly move to Bangalore at some point. And then he said, okay, but just come and start doing this with me. And at that point, I mean, I said yes also very instinctively at that point because I didn't want to move and I didn't want to get out. But I must say that I think I didn't fully understand what I was getting into because I don't have a background in publishing as such. I've done a little bit of writing and editing and things like that, but not really in the field in any way, like honestly, in any way at all. And so when it began, the first year also, I mean, all 5 years of its existence, but the first year particularly was very much me understanding what it is that publishing was, what publishing was within the arts. And that had a very, very big impact on my role within Reliable Copy and then how our conversations built what Reliable Copy turned out to be eventually. And that is also something that constantly changes. So that's another different part of the conversation. So for those of you who don't know already, Reliable Copy is a publishing practice and a curatorial practice. And it's run by 3 artists, which is Nihaal, me, and there's one more person, Sativ Hafsar. And the idea was very much to try and figure out 2 things. One was publishing as a system within the arts, which is not necessarily institutional or which is not something that is a catalog or a monograph that accompanies an exhibition or accompanies an artwork, but where the publication is the artwork itself, or the publication serves the purpose of bringing into light research that is backgrounded within the artist practice or artist writing, which is not given its due within an academic space. And that became a way for us, and that still becomes a way for us to figure out what it is that we want to publish and we don't want to publish. And how is it that we filter projects? And another side of it was looking at the fact that the 3 of us were artists and we had practices. And it's not like we were, like our personal practices are not extremely collaborative necessarily. There are moments when we have certain kinds of collaborations, but it's not a collective practice in any sense, the way that we work. And so Reliable Copy gave us a chance to do that. It gave us a chance to engage with another artist practice very, very closely, more closely than we would have as friends or as a curator or as a writer or as anything, in fact. That publishing with an artist at a time or a space at a time gave us a lot of access, just automatically gave us a lot of access. And because every publication takes at least a year, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, that started feeding back into our own practice because we started working with, of course, ideas that we really wanted to engage with, but also people that we really wanted to engage with, and then come up with some publication that would then suit that relationship or suit that collaboration. And sorry.
Okay.
Interestingly, though, Chinar was the first person that we published. And she was the first person that we collaborated with. And that was a project that turned up, that had begun a little bit before I joined. because I think Nihaal and Chinar were already talking about it. And that was a digital publication that also was then our only digital publication so far, which is called, sorry, I'm actually, now I can screen share. Just give me a second. Yeah. So that was a memorial for the new economy. I'm not going to get into talking about it in terms of what the work is about, because I think that's maybe easier to just access on the website. But just to say that in terms of publishing, this being the first, it existed as a downloadable folder of images, and it was copyleft. And so it was meant to be downloaded and circulated, and that is what kind of completed the cycle of the work. And that idea of a publication being, or a format of publishing being essential for the work to, or for the idea to do what it was meant to do, then became another kind of guiding factor in how we chose projects and how we kind of developed projects with people. So this website link again, I think Mala can put into the chat so you guys can access it. But so far we have done 10 projects, of which one is a digital publication, one is an exhibition, and the other 8 are books, paperback and hardcover. And we're working right now on the next 2. But that being said, we're also constantly, I mean, just because each project takes this much time, we're usually working on 4 to 5 projects at a time. And we know what we're going to publish, I don't know, for the next 3 years, Nihaal, maybe? Because that's just how the entire process has been. And we've learned to accept that more and more. Initially, we were kind of working on different kind of deadlines. Funding was really, really tight for the first 2, almost 3 years. And so we were, like, it almost became such that the more books you published in a year, the more you could kind of make ends meet. And that is starting to settle slowly. And now we're starting to look at maybe a slightly slower model to handle it. And maybe Mala has more questions about the model, so I'm not going to get into that too much right now. What was I starting? So this was an online publication, which was with Chinar. And after that, just to talk about a little bit the variation in format, I spoke a little bit about how we choose and why we choose to work with the people that we work with or the ideas that we work with. But because of that, there is no larger overarching theme. I was very recently asked this question by another artist and publisher in London, actually. And he was kind of saying that, can you in some way tell me why these 10 books? And that's really hard to tell, because it is very much about each of us, or at least one of us, being particularly interested in the subject and then being able to see through such a lengthy engagement with that artist and with the subject. So we have done this, and then there's Flexing Muscles, which is a bilingual book that talks about popular culture and flex banners in Bangalore. Then the next is somewhere in between a lecture performance and a photo book coming together as a publication. Nihaal is showing the images of the book on his screen, so maybe it is better for me to stop screen sharing, and that's a better way to look at the book. So there's this one, which is very much a photo book, and those are the chapters in the back. But if you flip through the pages, you'll see it's very image heavy in comparison to most of our other publications so far. And after this, what did we have now? We had a cookbook after this, which again was entirely different. And the differences are a very interesting part of the process, because each one then appeals to a very, very different audience. So there are individuals that are engaging in reliable copies practice as reliable copies practice, and so are interested in everything that we have done across genres and across geographies and everything, because it's not even like we're working with only artists from the subcontinent. There are artists from all over the world. Mario is from Colombia. And so this range helps in that kind of an engagement as well, which is again maybe not something we'd be able to do within our practices. So that's the cookbook. And the cookbook led to an exhibition almost. And that exhibition then became another aspect of how we engage with artists, because people we couldn't necessarily publish with, or we couldn't see a publication being a way to engage with their practice, then it became a curatorial engagement, which helped. And that then led to more publications just because of that time that we spent with them. Last of all of this is that another thing that slowly developed through the years, it wasn't something that really we were aware of in the beginning, is that we got very interested in not just generating new content with artists, but also bringing back things that had kind of got lost in history. And this began with two projects parallelly. One, which is a series which is called the Fine Art Dissertation series, which we have published two, and we're publishing two more. That's the book, which is to publish as facsimiles dissertations written by artists in their master's program, and then have an interview at the end that kind of recontextualizes it. So what was interesting about this is we didn't really look at it as a survey project, but there's one college in Baroda in Gujarat, which is where I studied. And we started this as an exercise with that archive. And even though we don't necessarily see this as something we will shift and do in other colleges, it is something that sets the precedent to say that dissertations are valuable and certain content like this is valuable, and maybe somebody else will pick it up and look at it in some other way through time. And the other was a book called Modernism, Murderism, which was again translating and republishing a series of essays that were published in the 1950s and 60s, originally in Gujarati, and then we translated to English. So this aspect of getting interested in content that already existed historically has now become another offshoot. And that led us to the idea of series, and the fact that functioning in a series also helps generate content which links together in a different manner than just very different single projects. And so along with this series, we have another one called Wiggle Room, which is, we have one book out so far. And I'll stop with this, which is our latest publication, which is with an artist called David Robbins. And this one in specific, the series in specific, is really important to us because it's us working with artists and artist practices who have charted out certain frameworks for their own practice and have also articulated it in a certain manner. And so each book almost acts as not just an introduction to that person's practice, but also for somebody else to take that forward and for somebody else to be able to nearly follow it as a way of making art, possibly. So, and the other reason why this is really important for us is that this is the first time where our editorial voices come in very, very strongly. That hasn't happened yet in this way, because in this particular one, it's very, very much about something that's much closer to our own practices than the others, which were more about highlighting something which we found important. Yeah, and that's it. That's pretty much where we are. And hopefully this hasn't been so long.
No, no.
And yeah, okay.
Thank you, Sarasija. I think what
No
will
problem.
come through as well is the very interesting move that both Chinar and Nihaal and Sarasija, you joined Nihaal on that journey from the domestic exhibition space to publishing. So Chinar, it would be lovely for you to talk about your movement from curating the domestic space to not physical publishing like reliable copy, but online publishing.
Thank you, Mala, Nihaal, and Sarasija. It's so lovely to actually hear both of you talk about this journey that I think I know so well, but actually when I hear it, I'm like, oh, I didn't know this. So Home Sweet Home coincidentally started as a conversation between me and Nihaal. Nihaal was just like finishing, I think at that point of time, G159, or maybe it had already come to a conclusion. And I just like said, oh, it would be good to start something in the city, because I don't live in the suburb. I live in the in a more central part of the city. And I was like, maybe now, because so many projects were coming to an end at that point of time, Gavatis, Nihaal, that Nihaal talked about, Roshan, all of them were leaving Shrishti. And I was like, oh, there's going to be like some sort of a gap now. And Nihaal was like, really, oh, yeah, you should totally do it. I just like said this out loud. And then I totally regretted saying this, because then he was like, you should totally do this. And I was like, oh shit, why did I say this? But anyway, that's how Home Sweet Home started, as just a conversation to think of, again, a domestic space as a way to represent artworks, exhibit artworks, work with artists in like a space that is primarily mine. We also exhibited later in other domestic spaces, but most of the exhibitions did happen in my own home where I live. And so yeah, that's how it started in late 2015. I had to move to Ahmedabad in 2016 because my father fell very, very sick, and I had to go and take care of things. I took a sabbatical from my job in Shrishti, went home, and it was a very difficult time for us as a family in general. And I was feeling I had left my job. I just started Home Sweet Home, and I had also left that. And in Ahmedabad, a friend said, why don't you continue? Why don't you do this in my home? And I was like, okay, it doesn't have to be my own space. It can be any home, really. And so I studied in NID, and we collaborated with students from NID at that point of time and put up an exhibition just really casually in Ahmedabad. And it was so well received. Suddenly I realized that just like changing the city can also really help in so many ways, because you would get completely different audience, completely different interests, so on and so forth. The last exhibition we did in 2019 was actually a collaboration. I invited Joseph Lubitz, this curator from New York, to come and curate a show that was like also first of a kind for Home Sweet Home, a really, really big shift. I thought, I was like, this is the way to be. This is like, we need to work with curators and probably like work with people who are also already thinking about curation to do this. And it was this show in 2019, and a lot of things happened, but essentially COVID happened, and we could no longer sustain doing exhibitions at that point of time. And the long COVID haul, I think, also shifted for me in some ways in terms of my interest and everything. I wasn't also like, I wasn't ready to let people in the house again in the same manner, when already Nihaal and I were talking about, again, like it's all of us like we live very close to each other. We are always like, constantly talking about things. And I was telling him that it's really interesting how Bangalore is this space where so many of these artist-led initiatives have happened. And I wonder if it's really been historicized properly. And that conversation then took me to Smriti, actually. And ASAP was just beginning, and I was talking to her at that point of time, and I was thinking, I'm thinking, because Smriti was also part of organizing exhibitions at that point of time, and I was thinking, I'm thinking about all of this, and I'm not sure, but it seems like something that maybe nothing formalized has happened in like, we have, of course, like I said, proper art history textbooks and everything, but I'm not sure if like artist-led initiatives have been part of this art history in India. And again, this idea started as a conversation between friends and me, just thinking about it. And the ASAP grant really kicked it off for me, because I think I was also at a time when I just left my job and I didn't want to do something without money. And I also, like, Home Sweet Home again ran without money. It ran out of my house. We were already like paying the rent. So there was like really no resource. But this time around, it was really, really important to have resources, not for ourselves, but also to pay forward people who are going to be writing for us or working with us. So that kind of became a very key, I think, shift in this journey. I would still like to do actually exhibitions, but the last 1.5 years have been really about this project. I'll now share my screen to show you the website. So this is it. it's a research and publication platform primarily to think about independent initiatives in the arts in India. So it is really a dedicated space, not to mainstream art spaces or organizations, but to artist-led, curator-led, cultural worker-led, DIY, DIT spaces. And the intention was to do an editorial, like I had like some experience in being an editor before, and I thought, okay, maybe I could invite writers to write. And soon after, I realized that that's not going to be enough, because I also personally want to be involved in the process and do a lot of other things that are not only about getting people to write essays, but we, so at the moment, it's an ongoing process. We are still working on many edits of different essays, but we invited various writers, artists to write about independent initiatives in the arts. Some of them are friends. Friends wrote about friends' work. So, for instance, this is Anisha, who wrote about the Yelahanka spaces, actually, which has a huge, larger list than even what Nihaal today talked about, but it has G159's that painting, and a lot of these spaces sort of appear, and there were so many more. And we did also some long form essays, two-part essays, because it just needed a lot of time. Bangalore has been a focus of also this work because of this another IFA grant, but also because I'm situated here. So this, before all of us like existed here, there was a lot of like actually artist-led initiatives in Bangalore. Bangalore seems like a very key space for such engagements and initiatives. And one of the key things about these engagements and initiatives in Bangalore is that it feels like, now having talked to some of these artists, that it's an extension of practice. It's not really about just like an organization, or we just did an exhibition, or we ran like an exhibition space, but it is truly thought of as part of artistic practice. So Shramona, she was a research scholar at JNU and did an extensive work. And then eventually she had a chance to go to Aarau, this small town in Switzerland, where Bangalore artists had like a connection in the late 90s. And she had access to this extensive archive, both in Switzerland and in Bangalore, to write this two-part essay about these exhibition exchanges that happened between Aarau and Bangalore. So on one hand, we've done a whole range of like commissioning of essays, which is still continuing at the moment. And this also includes interviews. This like page looks a little sparse, and it's only Nihaal. It's like 2 interviews up, but it's going to be like soon populated now. But we are really interested in interview formats, and Nihaal was really interested in doing interviews. So he was commissioned to do 2 interviews, one with Shrishta and one with Suman and Edgar. Along with these commissions, very soon I realized that there was a problem. The problem is that there is no like understanding of what are we talking about? What is the demographic? What are like how many artist-led initiatives were there? Who were doing what? Any basic information, and there wasn't one source that to derive it from. So we kind of I worked with Moksha, another friend from the Shishti time. She was also part of G159, to actually create a list, a simple list of self-organized initiatives in India, primarily from 1990s, because that was the timeline we were looking at. Now, from now on, it's going to actually expand. So here we have around like 150 150-ish names of divided across north, west, south, east zone, and elsewhere that's internet or any other space. This division is primarily just to ease our work, because we would approach friends, for example, who would know a lot more about the North, and say, do you know any of the initiatives that we are missing out on, or we don't know anything? And then we would get in touch with other artists. The other artists would take us to other initiatives. So it was just this like a very organic process, which felt like it would be easy if we do this in a very in this like a geographical format. So it's this open source list. It's an ongoing list. Anybody can actually add to this list. It's not like we started it, but it's really like anybody can add to it. It's a simple list of artist-led initiatives, a little bit about each initiative, their contact information. We also eventually decided to create like this one more column about status, as to whether whatever information we have collected, whether we've like been able to confirm it, or it just comes from like some random source at the moment, and we put it up. So that if like a researcher is looking at this like list, they would know whether this information has come from the first-hand source, or like has come from somewhere which we haven't been able to confirm. So the list, making of this list, was this like mammoth task that has taken us like a year. This another part of this project is to archive some of these things, like worried that not everything is archived and it will like go away, and nobody like, it's because a lot of these things are like very short-lived, not even in like public memory fully. What would happen? But it's not as if we had like a lot of resources to work through it. But what we did was that whoever was working on an essay, we said that we would digitize the material that you have access to. So for example, Saurabh was working on this photography collab at the Jadavpur University, and we digitized all the souvenirs, they're called souvenirs, they're catalogs, magazines, their reports. We digitized all of it, and you can go on the website, Home Sweet Home website, and you'll have access to this Google Drive folder if you just click on it. So similarly, every time we had like a writer writing on something, we offered to digitize that archive. Kalamela, Ravi Kashi, whom these guys have also worked with, he was writing this essay on Karnataka Kalamelas. There are Kala fairs they happened in the 80s, early 80s. So along with his essay, we made the entire archive of Kalamela catalogs available online. So yeah, there's this the Roshan's cards that Nihaal just showed. It's an entire series now, again, which is downloadable from Google Drive. So it's not, I mean, it could be called a collection, maybe not an archive, I'm not entirely sure, but what I think we are trying to at the moment do is collect whatever is connected to an essay and make it available. And maybe in future we would be able to do like a lot more focused work around archiving some of these initiatives. Exhibition is it lists all the exhibitions we've done. Reading list is just like we've just begun working on this list. This was like also an original intention. We created a list, but I felt that the list also needed like reviews. So today only I was like uploading the first book review that we did. This book actually Reliable Copy is selling. I don't know if they still have it, but we decided that it would be like a book review. And then the list, the entire list would probably have either a short or a long form writing about the book also. So yeah, this has been the journey. It's just been 1.5 years of working on this research. There are a lot of the interview section looks very sparse at the moment, is because I haven't gone through all the transcripts of interviews and like edited them and all of that. So that's like yet to happen. So there's like a lot of work that has happened, but it's not really fully formed. But yeah, this has been 1.5 years of just exploring and working with writers and so many other people, artists, to think about independent initiatives.
I have delved through it a little bit already, and obviously ASAP was hugely impressed by your work that you did, but it's amazing to spend time with it, like we've been able to spend time with Reliable Copy and G159's archives and current kind of collections. I'm going to ask one question, but while I ask the question, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat, and I will read them out. My question is actually really connected to something that I know Chinar's been thinking about and writing about, and also that Sarasija kind of mentioned, is how these independent initiatives relate to your individual artistic practices, and how these independent initiatives can be seen beyond the administrative tasks of putting together a publication or putting together a website and editing as an artistic practice. And this is kind of a good little discursive moment for you to think about.
Chinar, you want to start?
Oh, I thought Nihaal would go first.
But do you want me to go first? Is that? I think, when I started G159, I was in art school. Well, I was in design school trying to be an artist. And somewhere I knew that as an artist, what you do is make exhibitions. And the only way to get an experience doing exhibitions at that point was to wait for your graduation exhibition or something like that, 4 years later. So I said, okay, the best way to learn is by doing it and by helping other people realize their exhibitions. And that's really how G159 kind of happened. And through that, I learned so much. I learned how, first I was more involved in hanging shows, but after a certain point, artists took full lead. And then I just, stepped back and saw what they did and how that space could transform so many times. It was also where I was living, so I could really feel that transformation and see what was happening. And it was widely different. It wasn't just about, laying grass on the floor. It was also just how things were positioned, Ragini's light sculptures, how they activated certain spaces, how Yogesh took that mirror out of there and kept it somewhere else. And, I got my training in exhibition making there. Not just in hanging, but in installation shots, how to photograph it, how to present it, how to light it. And, that for me was a really great thing. And then, it ended in 2016 because I was graduating and I was moving out of Yelahanka, hopefully, which I did. And, for a few years, I didn't have anything going on. And that's when I started missing firstly working with other artists in realizing their projects or in being a collaborator in some way. But also I missed how much I was learning by doing that. Because I always felt what I learned in college was less than half of what I actually studied in those 4 years. But what I learned here at home was very important to me. And, in those 2 years, I really did not want to start another project space. I really did not want to start a gallery. I really did not care to do more exhibitions because I had done enough. And then there were other problems. If you start a space, you're kind of stuck to that space. I wanted to be a bit more mobile. I wanted to, travel a bit more, live in other places. But this idea of publishing started to kind of, just started to happen around me. At that point, I had no experience, whether in designing books or publishing books or editing books or nothing. I was starting off the same way I was starting off G159. And I realized, okay, the best way to learn is now I'll just commit to it and do it. And then it'll just happen. And the people around me will teach me. And at that point, I was like, Roshan, my best friend from college, you will do the books. You will design. Chinar, you will do the first book. And then Sarasija happened in my life. And that was one of the most wonderful things that's ever happened to me, is just Sarasija landing up at Shanti Road for those few months when I had just come back from Lebanon. And I mean, with Reliable Copy, it was very close to what Chinar said, where, she had done the exhibitions, but then when she wanted to do the publishing, she formalized herself. She started a partnership firm. She wanted to get the funds in so everyone could be properly compensated for that work, which G159, of course, never did. We didn't pay anyone. We never got paid. We didn't have any money to do anything. it just happened, and it was fine when you're students to do it like that. But at this point, I knew that this would be my job. If I was to give it my all, it would also be Sarasija's job. And if Chinar is doing a book, she also has to get paid, and we have to pay for the making of that book. And so we initially decided to register it as a non-profit trust. But now I'm moving to another conversation, so I'll stop here. But to say that working with other artists and realizing their projects within these frameworks became the best way to learn how to do something. Like for me, now I can start publishing my own books and approach that because I know what goes into it. And I've gotten the chance to rehearse so much with so many other projects. I mean, I don't mean rehearse lightly. I've done the best I possibly can with every book, and so has Sarasija. And I felt I did the same with the exhibitions, but there was somebody else to guide me, which is the artist, which is the designer, which is my co-editor. So that's been, the learning has been the greatest thing. And now I'm equipped to do my own exhibitions, do my own books. That's the answer in that sense.
Should I? Sarasija,
Yeah, go for it. Oh, go for it.
I mean, when I started like working with and talking to artists, whoever started like these various initiatives, I didn't. It felt like it was an obvious thing, but somehow I didn't think about it. Is that actually often it's an extension of practice, because often these spaces are called the project spaces. They also have very specific intentions that goes beyond like just exhibiting. There's something more to it. There are minute details that are really part of like of an individual practice that enters these spaces. As I thought more and more about it, and as I spoke to few artists, I realized that all of this really comes from the space of the practice. And then very initially when I was thinking, why do artists do this? It is a really hard thing. It's not easy because you're working without a funds. You have to put up all these exhibitions or like work on publications and editorial roles and take up editorial roles that you've not actually been trained to do. And there are so many other roles that you have to do as like someone who's running things. You're the accountant, you're the bookkeeper, you're like everything essentially. Why would artists do this when you're already skilled at doing something else? And the initial assumption at that point of time, which is still true, is that the impulse comes from a very restrictive and codified spaces at the moment in the art world. Museums really have like a national, like a state hold, and then there are all these private spaces that not all artists would have access to in terms of showing works, or also like is going there talking about the work, so on and so forth. And it's this frustration with this kind of the art world often leads to creating a space of your own. So this was the initial assumption in the project. Though it still holds true, there is this impulse that comes from that are already like immediate realities. What is interesting is that it's also an extension of the practice. And it's also something that you, like I said, already thinking about, working about, or something, and whether it's in its really realized format or not. Like Nihaal, probably, I'm not sure. Like he hadn't really made books, so it's not as if like you're like thinking about making books of yourself, but like there's a certain kind of a practice that you're interested in, and then you go on to do something that is not really only about your own work. And that process sort of like is really interesting, as to think of artistic process that is not really just like sitting alone working on in your sketchbook or something, but really do this collaborative work with other artists. And for myself, that's when I also was like thinking about my own practice and what it means. And I realized that I kind of sometimes get tired of making art. I'm bored. I'm bored of just like doing one thing, and I want to do actually other things. And this allows me to do multiple different things. And I'm not only like sitting on my desk and constantly making work. And that form, and also this idea of like collaboration that Sarasija and Nihaal both talked about, that it allowed me also to like collaborate. It allowed me to like work with people. I think has by now felt like it is truly an extension of my practice, my art practice in a way. It's not, my art practice is not just the artworks that are like so easily labelable as artworks, but it's also all of this, I think.
I'm going to try and keep my answer short also because Nihaal and Chinar have genuinely said very, very much of what I would have said. But a couple of things that I realized which are very, very similar is that this satisfaction, that concept of how it was not completely satisfying what was available in being an artist and what was available in exhibiting and what was available in being able to share an idea or an object or any such thing was very, very important to me. It was something I was already thinking about even before I joined Reliable Copy. And there is something now when I hear Nihaal and Chinar talk as well, there's a lot of similarity between those three aspects. And because each of these three, G159, Home Sweet Home, and Reliable Copy, came out of that impulse, it also tried to create those solutions for us within our own practices. So as we were creating some way in which other artists could insert themselves into spaces other than the white cube, we were almost creating those for ourselves as well. And that became an interesting shift for me in how I engaged with material, how I engaged with resources, how I engaged with an idea, a medium, anything. And the other side of it, which maybe is a bit different from how Nihaal and Chinar talk about their aspects of practice and this merging, is that even though I joined Reliable Copy as an odd range of things and I never really knew what the role was going to be, it gradually became more and more editorial. And that editorial aspect of my role in Reliable Copy is actually a tendency that I have very, very much in my artistic practice as well, in my studio practice as well, where I am constantly engaging with resources, with material as an editor. And I hadn't even realized that till almost 2 years of having done this role within Reliable Copy. So there are those other aspects which, for me at least, I began to notice things that I hadn't even realized before as options. So it's kind of like how Nihaal talks about G159 as realizing that moving a mirror from that one place to another place was a gesture of an artist and communicated a very specific idea by that gesture. And that makes you think of 20 other gestures that exist. That happened for me, and that continues to happen to me quite a bit within Reliable Copy, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. I think even just the archive of this conversation is really important when this conversation goes online for people to listen to and think about how these alternative spaces exist. There is one question which I'm going to go through, and maybe only one of you will answer it so that we don't lose everyone. I know it's late in India. And thank you, Ananya, for asking and also for listening to us. She has written that one thing that really came through for her is a sense of community that seems to characterize and underpin all of these projects. And she was wondering if we could speak a bit more about how you've sustained these collaborative working relationships over longer periods of time, and maybe even what, if any, the challenges have been along the way. So I don't know who wants to take the question.
I don't want to take the question, but I just have one thing to say, which might illustrate something of this, which is the scanner that we use. Chinar showed us the digitization project she's doing, and she's digitized all that material on one Epson scanner. And that's the scanner we've used to digitize the dissertations for the 2 publications that we have. And it's also the scanner Home Sweet Home uses as an office scanner and Reliable Copy uses as an office scanner. But where the scanner came from, it came from a grant Chinar and I got for an artwork that we are making. We applied for a grant and we got the money to buy a scanner, and that's how the scanner came into our lives. So just as a kind of extension of this idea of sharing resources as a community, but I'm not answering the question, somebody else.
And just to add to what Nihaal said, I think is also to realize that how probably grant-in-aid organizations can actually think about helping with building infrastructure, because that's often not the case with, which is actually the great thing about ASAP grant, is that that is the case, that you can build resources, because when you build resources, you can do so much more beyond that grant period, versus most grants at the moment focus on only do this project, do that project, but you're not really helping in infrastructure. And if you can't help us in infrastructure, then we will do the project for that 1 year, but what happens after that year? But even though that grant ended, we have like truly used that scanner. Like really, we're waiting for it to now stop working. It's been that much. So that's kind of, it's a great thing to overcome a challenge, that you build infrastructure for yourself, or which can be shared also.
I like the fact that the answer to this question in some way or the other came back to this idea of economy in a sense, because I think collaboration is, of course, in many ways about relationship, and there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of favors and a lot of that side of the economy of collaboration. But I guess for all three of us, it has been at different points of time, and Chinar has already brought this up, extremely important to also look at it as different kinds of compensation, which included monetary compensation. And that really does help sustain collaborative practices. There is, of course, the grant that allows Chinar to be able to take forward a project. But in the fact that her collaboration with the 50 other people that she's worked with is monetarily compensated, will allow for that to also continue in other ways. And I think that is a really, really large part of it. There are, of course, many other parts of it which are about relationships and community. And I mean, Chinar literally lives on the first floor of the house where I'm staying right now. And a lot of this also gets kind of inculcated in the way that we'll end up functioning. And the pandemic did something, like when Chinar was talking about that shift in home sweet home, I was thinking that also did a little bit of something for us, where collaboration expanded globally very quickly, which at one point was very slow. And even if we worked with an artist like Mario, he came here and spent 4 months with us. And that was the only way we thought a publication could exist. And to be honest, the last publication we just did, the person that we collaborated with, David Robbins, we've never met each other at all, but we've managed to work for 2 years now and have a publication out. So there are a lot of other aspects like that, but I think there is something instinctive in accessing, talking about the monetary aspect of it, because that is also as shared as the other aspects of collaboration. I don't know, I think.
I just want to add 2 words to this, like I said, to just answer this actually question directly for me, at least. I think money and lack of contracts. These are the 2 main challenges working in the arts at the moment for me. That's what comes to my mind. There are other challenges, of course, but this is a really big.
I hope we answered the question though, Ananya. I wonder if we all went off into some other tangent. Okay.
I think, Sarasija, you brought it back. But I think the scanner is a very crucial, small but mighty example of collaboration and community. I'm aware how late this is gonna get for all of you, and Ananya just responded that it did answer her question, so that's great. I wanted to really thank Chinar, Nihaal, and Sarasija for giving us your time, for spending time on really expanding on your practices. I know that a lot of the audience are your friends, but whoever was not already your friend will become a friend of your spaces as well. And whoever missed the talk will be able to access the recording at the end of the month on ASAP's website and on our YouTube channel. Thank you to everyone for listening, and please do chime in for our next talk, which will be at the beginning of November. And I am not going to be rude, but I do have to click end. So if you do get kicked out of the room, please don't get offended. And thank you again, and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.